welcome into a brand new edition of Going Deep Buffalo. I'm your host, as always, Kevin Massare. Love co-host Kevin Siracuse in here in a little bit. I'm here with a friend, fan of the show, someone we do an AFC East SmackDown with every Monday, DouglieDoWrong. Doug, how you doing today, man? How you feeling?
I'm doing good. In the long scheme of things, I'm doing good. But this Sunday is oh.
Well, I mean, football's football. Division games are division games. I know that we know the Bills' numbers. We know their success against the Dolphins. Bills have struggled with the Jets in the past. They've struggled at times with the Patriots, not as much, and not as much with the Dolphins. But the Dolphins still know the Bills. They still know their tendencies, and you never know what could happen. Weather looks good, which is probably a good thing for the Dolphins. They're getting them in early November rather than late December.
Mhm.
So definitely a couple of pros if you're looking at it from a Dolphins perspective. But obviously the Bills are coming in one of their best road wins that they've had in a little bit. Everyone said Seattle's so hard to play. Yes, they're not the greatest team in the world, but they've been winning. They beat Atlanta down in Atlanta. And it's going to be tough to go there and play. The Bills took care of business in a pretty bad weather environment. And are coming home now pretty healthy for the most part, Doug. They've had some injury issues all season, and really a commanding victory over the Seahawks was pretty helpful after a pretty nice Titans game. But first and foremost, most pretty people here are pretty in tune with your team a little bit and your record. But give us a recap. I always like to ask this. Give us a recap. I know up on your channel you had your half season review. Give us your recap of the Dolphins to this point. Break down what's going on. Obviously, we know about the Tua concussion. We witnessed it. But tell us about beyond that. What's going on with the defense? Let's banged up. Just break it all down for our listeners so we can kind of take it from there.
Yeah, it's funny when Tua went out and we were facing, some inferior teams like the Colts and the Titans, but even Seattle, the defense was doing their thing. The defense was forcing 3-and-outs, forcing, stops on fourth down, giving the offense the ball over and over and over again. Seattle, we held them scoreless for 2.5 quarters. They scored 17 points in the first quarter, didn't score a point until the fourth quarter. So there was opportunity there. Same thing with the Titans. A lot of these games where you looked at, the Dolphins lost 31 or 24, all those points came at the end of the game when the Dolphins defense was just kind of winded from consistently forcing turnovers. So then Tua comes back, and I'm thinking, hey, if we can get that same type of situation, and then the Dolphins defense didn't show up in the fourth quarter and gave up 21 points and like 258 yards. And it was just a complete crap show in the second half of that game, where now I'm sitting here and I'm like, you look at what we've lost in, Deshaun Elliott, Brandon Jones, Christian Wilkins, Andrew Van Ginkel, and they are big reasons why the defense is the way the defense is now. We have no pass rush. We have 9 sacks on the season. We get a ton of pressure. Like, don't get me wrong. We are like top 12, top 10 and getting pressure, hurries, quarterback knockdowns. We can't get sacks. Like, we just cannot get sacks if our life depended on it. And that is what's killing us, especially against these mobile quarterbacks like Anthony Richardson, Kyler Murray, and Josh Allen week 2, where, we just had a hard time bringing them down. And that's something that we've always had a hard time with Josh Allen, is bringing him down. So for me, my biggest worry right now and what's going on with this team is, Tua came back. When he came back, he showed this is my offense. First drive, marches him down the field, scores a touchdown. I'm like, okay, yeah, we're good. 13-10 at halftime. Then he comes out after half, scores another touchdown. I'm like, yeah, we're good. It was just the defense was just non-existent. So for me going forward, that's where I'm worried. I'm like, this defense is, I don't know if our offense can match what the defense is going to be giving up, and that's the biggest problem.
I know we were talking about it Monday, and TD basically wanted to blame your offense, which I found was interesting. So I wanted to get your input. Look, I mean, I'm sure things aren't perfect. The safety was weird. Tua defended it today. Like, you go and try eating your chips or whatever. And I was like, I don't mind the fire. I don't. But that's always a little much when you take it to the fan
The fans,
perspective.
Yeah.
I don't mind snapping back a little bit on reporters because sometimes they're really stupid.
Uh-huh.
But I thought that was a little too far the other way.
Uh-huh.
So what's your opinion on so far, the offense being I watched the game from my perspective, totally unbiased, really wasn't sure how that game was going to go. I thought the offense looked fine. Obviously, everything's not perfect. I thought Achan was really good. They went away from him a little bit. I saw was really strange, but I guess whatever could have dictated that. Weaver doesn't seem like a great defensive coordinator, but I don't have a ton of data
Mm.
either way. But the numbers don't look good on a lot of the things I'm looking at. But so tell me, like offensively now, people are blaming some stuff, and content creators are blaming the Dolphins offense. And to me, like, sure, it's not perfect, but it looked pretty efficient, and you can't really blame them too much. They shouldn't have gone away from Achane so much.
Mm.
Waddle's not getting involved as much as I would expect. I think he's a really great receiver. So I guess we'll start there. Like, Tua did look like he came in and immediately made McDaniel's offense. I mean, literally, they're a pretty good match together. I think even Bills fans could admit that, like, those two together
Mm.
do work out. So what's the concern where some people are still blaming the offense on the Miami side?
I think some people want it to be perfect, right? And some people, oh, you're paying Tua $55 million a year. He should play like a $55 million quarterback. Want the perfectness out of it, right? No quarterback in the NFL is ever perfect. Josh Allen, he's been perfect so far this season, which good for you guys. But like even Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes against the 49ers, he threw 3 interceptions, no touchdowns. No quarterback's perfect. But if you're going to tell me that your offense is going to have 8 drives and you're going to score on 5 of them, and you're going to score 27 points, I'm happy with that. Like, you got 3 drives that you don't score any points. I'm happy with that. Okay, our defense should be able to step it up. And you look at, they held the Patriots to 10 points. And then before that, like, they were holding these teams to under the points they need to. But like, Tua came out and Tua was playing well. He made a throw on 3rd and 12 where he stayed in that pocket. It collapsed around him. He got the ball to Jonnu Smith for the first down. Like, he was showing, even him running for the first down on 3rd and 9 and sliding. He got a standing ovation in that stadium because they were like, he's good. He's good to go. There was drops. There was a lot of drops. Now, some of the drops didn't really matter. Like, Jalen Waddle had a blatantly easy drop, but we ended up scoring on that drive anyway, so that didn't really matter. But like Jonnu Smith on 2nd and 9, he was butt naked open, dropped the ball, could have been a first down. We could have got minimum field goal on that one. Then it would have been 6 out of 8 drives was a score. The last drive of the game where we ended up punting it back to them, I think it was 2nd down before the 3rd and 12 play. He hits Jonnu down the right sideline, 50-50 ball. That's Jonnu's bread and butter. He should go up and grab that. He catches that, and he got his hand on it. He catches that. We have the ball in their 40. We can eat that clock up, kick a field goal, and instead of being up by, I think it was 2, we'd be up by 5. And then all of a sudden the game's a little bit different, forces them to be a little bit more aggressive. There was a lot of drops, but also I'm not going to sit here and absolve Tua of, missing on some throws. He definitely missed on some throws. The deep ball to Tyreek, he threw it too late and he kind of tried to throw his whole body into it. He missed some other passes here and there. But, you look at Tua's stats and you look at his rating. His rating went down because of the fumbles. He had 3 fumbles. One of them he lost, which was the safety. And if you watch that safety, I put it on Brewer and I put it on Tua. I think it's a 50-50 blame for there. Brewer came out. He said, I shouldn't have done it so hot. And when I watched the film, the ball went at Tua sideways. It wasn't like a normal snap, and it went here, and the ball was sideways. So Tua had to really quickly try to grab it. Regardless, it hit Tua in the hands. If you can't grab it, at least get it down in front of you so it's not a safety. But I had no problem with the offense. Would I have liked them to score on 8 drives and demolish the Cardinals? Of course. The Cardinals are a bad defense, but it just is what it is. And the defense should have stepped up. You score 27 points. Defense should, make a stop at some point in the second half of the game. You were doing it in the first half. And it had a lot to do with, as I like to call him, Mighty Mouse. We had pressure on Kyler Murray so much. We had blitzers who had a free shot at him, and it's just Kyler Murray. He's going to spin out of it. Jordan Poyer drops an easy interception that would have put us on their 30 and probably put the game out of reach for him. There's a lot of things that went wrong in this game, and to me, it wasn't. I blame 30% on the offense, and I give the rest of the blame on the defense.
It's funny because I pulled some offensive line metrics too, because I was just curious when you mentioned Brewer and some of the stuff. They look decent. Like, are they perfect? No. But pulling your interior stuff looks good. I pulled some pressure situations, win rate. And you look at Brewer's been a pretty good center, funny enough. where, I mean, hasn't been, at least in the data perspective, hasn't been a huge downgrade to Connor Williams.
No.
At least from what I see here, Robert Jones has been pretty good. Eichenberg's always hit and miss. It is who he is. Austin Jackson hasn't had the world's best year, but been fine. So the O-line's been pretty good. Now, the problem with the data, I can't ever pull it on Miami right now because Tua hasn't been in. So it's useless.
Exactly.
So for me, it's like, I don't care if it's good or bad. It doesn't really matter, especially offensively, because I can't pull it. That's why I have you on. I can't pull a good read on the Dolphins at all. The analytics say you suck. I mean, they say you're terrible, like one of the worst in the league.
100%.
I don't believe that, though, especially the week one. Yes, the Bills ran them out week two. But then last week's version, yes, they did lose. I still can't put them in the lower tier of teams with this roster. Yeah, the injury report looks terrible.
Yeah.
On your end, especially defensively.
Some of it's pretty bad.
Holland is a big I mean, he's one of my favorite safeties in the league.
If
he doesn't go, that's a huge deal for Josh Allen. And it looks like I think McDaniel said he's week to week, right?
Because
they're hoping, but
he was banged up, and then he played this game, and they got injured again. And he keeps getting injured, and it just really sucks.
That's a bummer. One of the best safeties in the league, in my opinion. I think data would support that for the most part. Most of the time, I do agree. He's one of the best players in the league, and he's not playing amazing this year, but the injuries are probably taking a little bit of a toll on him. Marcus May's been pretty good, though, in his limited action. I mean, Poyer's been horrible. Bills fans are making a joke about it. I mean, he should have. But, look, he wanted to be in Miami. His wife loves Miami. If you're going to go out, maybe you go out where you wanted to play, and there's still, a little bit of time there for you. You didn't get that big of a contract. What did you give him, $2 million?
Yeah, I think it was with incentives, it goes up to $2 million. It's nothing.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's not a bad flyer. I probably would have him replaced.
100%. 100%.
But, I mean, if you're having injury issues with Holland and you're already playing, May, May's had 227 snaps so far this season. What are you supposed to do? You definitely have some injuries. What are you supposed to do? And that's kind of where the Bills are last year with him too. So
yeah, exactly.
I totally get it. But okay, I got a question for you. I've been asked this question by some of our listeners here. And somebody asked me to ask you, what happens if you don't pull off the Bills victory? Are you in a situation to where you should stock up because the wild card might even be gone at that point? This isn't even a division game in terms of in the Bills' eyes. The Bills could lose and have plenty of cushion to make sure they're okay. The Dolphins can win and look okay. Some of those bottom wild card teams aren't great to me. But a loss, I don't know how. And then you have a fairly decent schedule. I saw your breakdown on your channel. I'll put it in the comments. Anybody that wants to check out DouglieDoWrong's channel and all of his recap, his midseason recap. If you want to go a little more in depth there, I'll put that in the comments section. But tell me about what happens if they do lose. Is it fair to say they should make some calls before the deadline, or do you think you stay the path? But building up right now could be pretty key for your future.
Yeah, 100%. And it sucks because we're in a situation right now where, for me, it was the Cardinals game. Because I never, even after we lost to you guys the first time, I was like, all right, Tua got hurt. I'm like, if the defense can play, because that first game, we kind of went tit for tat a little bit. We forced you to punt after the half. So there was a possibility of making it a fight.
There was.
But once Tua went down, I was like, all right, well, he gets healthy. If the defense can stay where they're at, then that game maybe is a possibility. But we need to get to 500. But why Tua comes back and all this stuff. And then I was like, well, we're not at 500. So this Cardinals game, if they lose the because at that point I was like, they ain't beating the Bills. So I'm like, the Cardinals game, if they lose this Cardinals game, that's it. There's no way on God's green earth you're going 9 of 10 for the last half of the season. And they lost the Cardinals game. So now I'm at the point where I'm like, they're not making the playoffs. If they beat the Bills, and I've already put a bet in, Bills are giving 6.5. I already bet the Bills. I think you guys are going to win by 20. So there's no way they're not beating the Bills. But if they somehow miraculously beat the Bills, then all of a sudden I'm thinking playoffs. I'm like, okay, if you could beat the Bills, you can beat the Rams, you could beat the Raiders, you can beat the Patriots, then you're sitting at 6-5. And then, these other teams like the Packers, who barely beat the Jaguars, are possibilities. So you have somewhat of a possibility, but reality is you ain't beating the Bills. So now you're at a point where it's like you said, you start trading off assets. Like, Tron Armstead, he's playing like one of the best tackles in the NFL right now. He's not going to be with the team for much longer. If that next year they cut him and Bradley Chubb, they save like around $30 million in cap space, which they need, and they probably are going to make those moves. You trade him and get some assets. Jalen Ramsey, do you trade him and get some assets? Like there's a core group of players that we won't trade. Tua, obviously, Jalen Waddle, any of our running backs in Achane and Wright. Mostert could be a trade possibility. Those are your core guys that you're not going to move on from. Defensively, I can't really see many. Like Sealer's probably a guy that's going to stay, and obviously Jalen Phillips, you're not going to trade him. He's injured. But then you have to think, who's going to be the GM? Because if it's Chris Grier, I want Chris Grier fired after we lost the Titans game. And the fact that he's still in the building is driving me absolutely nuts. I don't trust him to do anything because of the team he built. This is an old, injured team. Like if you look at the roundabout median age of this team, it's like 31. And we have no depth, and they're injury prone. That's why we are where we are right now. So it's like, do you trust this guy with more draft picks? Because he's been missing on draft picks, and he's been missing on talent he lets go by. So I would like to, like, if all of a sudden Stephen Ross was like, I'm going to be a good owner right now, and I'm going to fire this guy and bring in a new one. And that was my plan. Fire Chris Grier, bring in a new GM, let the GM watch Mike McDaniel. If Mike McDaniel ends the season at 9-8 and, we barely missed the playoffs, give him another year. But we need a new GM. This Grier's been with us for 9 years, and still purgatory with this team. So
it's the ongoing communication for any team, and whether you're in the World Series like the Yankees, whether it's did Brian Cashman not put on the right play, like it's always that discussion between teams. And for the Dolphins, it does seem like you would lean GM issues for the personnel that he's put on for Mike McDaniel rather than Mike himself. Is that kind of how you feel as a creator? Is that like where you're at with it? Would you give Mike McDaniel another year and a half, this year half, and then next year?
It depends. Like I said, like if they do make the change at GM and then all of a sudden there's like this fight in this team, and all of a sudden they make a move and they make a surge and he didn't lose the locker room, then yeah, I keep Mike McDaniel, because his first 2 years as the head coach, he lost Tua and still made the playoffs. And then last year he got decimated with injuries, this team, when Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, Connor Williams, Isaiah Wayne, Teron Armstead, like I can raffle down the list of injuries, still made the playoffs. So that's why he got the extension. A lot of people can't believe he gave him the extension. Back-to-back playoff appearances with a decimated injury team. So if he does show fight and we do beat teams like the Packers or the 49ers or, the Texans, then yeah, you keep him, give him another year and have another guy buying him groceries, because you have a guy in Chris Grier who replaced some guys who were doing fantastic other places with guys that aren't good. Like I said, you got Deshaun Elliott. He's doing fantastic with the Steelers. You replaced him with Jordan Poyer. You got Andrew Van Ginkel, who has more touchdowns than Tyreek Hill. You replaced him with Shaq Barrett, who retired. So it's like the moves don't make sense. Now, losing Wilkins and Hunt, that made sense. You ain't paying Wilkins $28 million and Hunt $20 million, but like the other ones, you could have brought him back and they would have been sustainably good with this team. So that's where it's like he's got to go. He's just making dumb decisions.
Yeah, Van Ginkel was an obvious one. I was happy to see him walk. He's never been someone that's been a dominant player, but I just felt like a huge bite out of what the Dolphins can do in terms of their depth. But I think what's interesting, there were people always mentioned the run the Bills went on last year to catch the Dolphins. There was the context missing is, yes, Tua didn't play the greatest down the stretch. He's not great in the cold weather, but the injuries you just railed off, if that happens to the Bills, if that happens this year to the Bills, who knows? But you never really know in those, even the Chiefs. If you get those type of, your pass rushers are gone, you're starting I remember your playoff defense reminds me a little bit of what the Bills face too.
Where Justin Houston as one of our pass rushers.
We were pulling news off of RVs. Literally, Brandon Beane was on air yesterday talking about how against Patrick Mahomes, he had to pull a dude off going to Disneyland with his family. Like the Bills linebacker room was decimated. And that's enough to lose, especially against Patrick Mahomes. And the Bills still made it a 3-point game late into the AFC divisional round. But like, look, you played the same Chiefs team last year in the playoffs, and it just looked like the talent wasn't there for the Dolphins.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point, it does look like a depth issue, injuries or not. It does seem like a GM issue on the outsider from an outsider's perspective. But not being inside, knowing every move and they make, I can't competently say it's not the coach.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, he does hover around 500. How much does he elevate the rest of his roster might be Greer's argument.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think anyone's going to let the coach get fired and the GM stay, right? That's not a world we're going to live in. Or maybe
it happened with Flores.
Right.
It's like Chris Grier has something on Stephen Ross that he has survived 3 different regimes, and it's crazy to me. But like with Mike McDaniel, he does really well and he makes really good calls, and then he'll make a stupid call. Like the last series against the Cardinals when we had the ball on offense, he ran the ball once, lost a yard, and then decided to throw it the next 2 times, even though we needed to eat the clock up. Like it was just some of his, like he threw a fade. Like one of the drives that ended in a field goal, he decided on 3rd and goal, he was going to throw a fade to Tyreek Hill instead of putting Jonnu Smith on that situation. Like it just, some of his decision making doesn't make sense. Like feeding the ball to Mostert, even though Achane was getting 9 yards a carry. It's like, where's your brain going? Why aren't you feeding the hot hand? Why aren't you sticking with the run in certain situations? So it could be a situation where he's in over his head, and that's where a lot of us are saying give up play calling, because you seem to have a hard time to do one or the other. So give up play calling.
And now with Anthony Weaver, what's your opinion on Anthony Weaver? I mean, you've gone through a couple of different defensive coordinators. Obviously, you've had some that have switched teams recently. What is your opinion on Weaver? It's a little tougher with the injuries and the old players we've already discussed. But does he have it? It does seem like that's one of his flaws in terms of Mike McDaniel, is like his coaching hires always seem to fail him, which is at some point your fault. But I don't have enough context. What's your opinion on Weaver? It does seem like that unit's regressed from what I thought the Dolphins could be 12 months ago.
Yeah, I like Weaver. I think Weaver is struggling due to the fact that he doesn't have a pass rush. Like Chop is raw. He's super raw. Like they got him at the end of the first, which probably, if they didn't take him by, the Ravens or somebody after, the Dolphins probably would have grabbed him. He gets a lot of pressure. He just can't finish. That seems to be the Dolphins' MO. Same thing with Agba and stuff. But I think if he had Chubb, if he had Phillips, like he had his guys to start, I think the defense would be a little bit better. But some of his decision making is questionable as well. But I think he's trying to cover up for inabilities, because against the Cardinals, he put David Long Jr. against McBride, or he put Jordan Poyer against McBride, or he put Cam Smith against Marvin Harrison Jr. And it's like, what are you doing, man? Like, you should have your best. If you're going to send an all-out blitz and you're going to play man on the back end, put your best man on these guys. Like, if I was him, I would have had Jordan Brooks, who is our best cover linebacker, super fast on McBride all game. But he had to blitz him, which I understand. Like there was no pressure, so now he has to send his speedy linebacker in to blitz and get after the quarterback. So it was a perfect storm of just hot garbage. So I think that might see the same thing again on Sunday, because we're facing another mobile quarterback. But like against Stafford and against Minshew and against maybe Jacoby Brissett, our defense will probably wake up and be able to contain them, because these aren't mobile quarterbacks. So we always have a problem with mobile quarterbacks.
Yeah. What's up, Dan? What's going on, man? But yeah, when it comes to like looking at real quickly your injury report, you're right. There is some good rest candidates in here, but you're still, we don't know what's going on with Sealer with the eye injury. Seemed, concerning, but at least it doesn't need surgery. You got Jordan Brooks on hamstring/wrist. You have Agba with eye/illness. Holland, obviously, we talked about. Storm Duck, a backup, possible prospect. So there's Cater Kohu. So there's seems to be, I mean, that's a lot to be missing against the Bills offense, like, period. And then obviously you've already gone through the pass rushers. Is it just tough luck? Because this is carrying over from the second year from this defense. What's happening with these
Some
injuries?
of it's luck, like Sealer's eye, which he cracked his orbital socket, and I'm sitting there like, how? Like, did you have your helmet off? Like, how is anyone getting in near your eye at all? That's just bad luck. With Jalen Phillips' injury, that was Jordan Poyer trying to make a tackle and shot at his knee and helmet to knee, and then his knee went out the next play. But then there's the other ones, like, Tron Armstead has stayed healthy, which is a beautiful thing. But like, we bring back Isaiah Wynn, who was dealing with an injury and then re-injures his other bicep. So he's like, we're probably never see him hit the field. Like, why are you bringing back and signing these injured players? And that is a joke that I always make on Twitter whenever like a player gets released or something. If they have an injury history, I'm like, we're going to sign him, because that's just what Chris Greer does. He's like, he'll be fine with us. Like, no, that's not how that works. You got to get guys who have a history of staying healthy and being good. So like, it's Odell Beckham. They signed him and he's injured, and he's out there, but he's barely doing anything. Shaq Barrett, they knew when they signed him, they knew he was questioning retiring, but they still signed him anyway instead of bringing back Andrew Van Ginkel. It's just dumb decisions. So I would say like a 20% of it is like bad luck, and then the rest is them just bringing in the wrong guys and making dumb decisions.
How's Cam Smith play? That was one I wanted to try to ask you about before you take off.
Not bad. I don't have much confidence in him. He got burnt, but a lot of it had to do, a lot of what I saw, especially like there was the touchdown pass to Marvin Harrison Jr., where Marvin Harrison was out wide on the left side and he had Jalen Ramsey on him. He ran a crosser all the way over to the front of the end zone from the 15. Like, you know how long that takes to run that route? I counted, and Kyler Murray had 5 seconds to let that play develop. So I always say it's a yin and yang when it comes to the pass rush and the secondary. Like, if you don't get in there, and it seemed like towards that part of the game, the Dolphins were more scared of Kyler Murray running. If you don't get pressure in there, these routes are eventually going to open up. You can only cover them for so long. That's where the pressure needs to get in. But then also on the flip side, if we're allowing quick slants and quick outs because we're not pressing, then the pressure won't get there. So it's a complementary type thing with that defense.
Yeah, certainly. And if you look through your roster, and I've seen some separation, like your back coverage has been bad.
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to pull something. Like, obviously, I love Holland. I think he's a really good safety. And obviously Ramsey does his thing for the most part. But the rest of it is rough, from your linebacking coverage scores to your separation creation. I mean, that's not Tua's fault. Like, there's definitely there's some challenges there for the Weaver's defense. There's some challenges there for anyone when looking through some of the separation. Kendall Fuller's been okay. Tater Kohu has been awful.
He's bad. He's bad in coverage. He's a great open field tackler, Cater, but he can't cover if his life depended on it.
And he's essentially hurt, right? He's basically been replaced for the most part. Is that right?
Yeah.
Like Smith?
Yeah, that's him and Ethan Bonner were the guys who were going to replace him.
Okay. Kevin, anything for Doug before we let him go? Any other Dolphins related questions you got?
Yeah, what's going on, guys? I do have one question. I was listening before I came on, so forgive me if I missed this. I heard you guys were talking about the depth, so maybe you touched on it a little bit, but the Dolphins are dead last in scoring, averaging 13.9 points per game. And when I saw that, I thought it was kind of confusing, because I know Tua's missed the past 4 games, but I figured with Mike McDaniel being able to scheme guys open, you have Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and the rest of the guys have been relatively healthy. I thought they at least would have been, 20th, 25th, but the fact that they were dead last, I was like, that's pretty alarming. Even if because Tua played 3-4 games, so that includes Tua. It's not like this is his first game of the season. So I guess just in summary, what is the reason for their offense just being so lackluster this season?
With Tua out, it had a lot to do with incapable backups, which again is a Chris Greer thing. Like they didn't bring in any backups that
Joe
could.
Flacco.
Yeah, exactly. Like Garner Minshew, Joe Flacco, like even Sam Darnold, who's doing really well with the Minnesota Vikings. they didn't fit the scheme. And you saw once Tua came back last week, the offense was moving. The offense was moving because Tua's bread and butter is quick, decisive throws with accuracy and anticipation. Like, he's going to get that ball out quick. Like, you watch the film, he's throwing comeback routes when when the receiver is bumping into the corner to turn around, the ball's there. Like, he is making it so that these receivers are able to get the yak and continue to run upfield and do all that stuff. Whereas Huntley and Skyler, it took them a second to process what was going to throw. So, like, a lot of these RPOs where they would keep the ball and then hit on slants, whether it was to Waddle or to Hill, they would like keep the ball and then wait to see if they got open. Whereas like Tua throws, I'm not looking. Like, he'll continue looking at the flat and he'll throw the slant to bait the corner in. Like, he's just that good at doing those things. And that is the huge difference between why the offense the score production is where it is, because I honestly think if Tua didn't get hurt, I think they would have destroyed the Tennessee Titans, because watching the film, Tyreek Hill was butt naked open on deep plays left and right. I think they would have beat the Seattle Seahawks because, again, we held them to no score for 2.5 quarters. Guys were open. It was for that one, I give it, Skyler probably never played in Seattle. And when you never play in Seattle, it is loud. And I think we would have beat the Colts with Tua in there because, again, I think it was like 9-6 or 9-something at halftime. The offense was struggling without him, and you saw it as soon as he came in. Touchdown. Like, it was just, we were moving the ball. So to me, it was a little rusty to start the season. We scored 23 against the Jaguars, and then I think we barely put up any points against you guys. I think he would have gotten to a groove, but he got a concussion because the man, for some reason, doesn't like to slide.
Yeah, right there, especially at the goal line, was probably a good place to slide.
If you're down 21, it's the fourth quarter. I get you want to we still have a chance. Like, he plays hero ball, and it drives me nuts. Like, my man, listen, we ain't winning this game. Just slide. You're fine. Like, it is.
We can still beat Seattle and Indy, right? Yeah, I mean, that's challenging. But like I said, here's my final point for you. Like, yes, the Bills have had awesome success against Tua and the Dolphins. Still, with Tua in that offense, they can beat anybody, in my opinion. Whether they will or not,
that's the big question.
Remains to be seen. But that offense, at least, I mean, the defense is going to have its challenges. At least the personnel today. Maybe that changes in 6 weeks. I don't know. I don't know what your plan is for, like, the defensive ends. Is Chubb supposed to come? I know he got hurt late last year, but you would think. And then it
was reported that it was McDaniel came out and people were joking. It sounded like a cable option, like a package option with your cable. He called it an ACL plus. So it wasn't just his ACL; he's also dealing with something else. So people were like, "It sounds like an addition to your Direct TV, like an ACL plus." Like, what the?
Yeah.
And when I heard that, I'm like, he's not coming back this year, because I thought he'll come back for the Raiders game. Like, I thought they're going on the road for these 2 games, and then he'll be back for the Raiders game. But once I heard ACL plus, I'm like, he's done. He's not coming back.
He's done. Yeah, that's not good. Especially depending on your record. I would imagine maybe a play late in the season, wild card push / division push. But late in the year, if you're out, like, there's zero reason. I mean, honestly, in fairness to him and the team. But I get it. Like, I mean, that's we have injury people on all the time, and that means that there's probably like a meniscus tear in there, an LCL, all types of different things. That's challenging, and super challenging for Phillips as well on his recent injury. Those are 2 guys you expected to have, or at least somewhat, this year. So that makes it tough. So give me your final recap. What's going to happen to the Dolphins? I don't need you to put on, like, you don't need to, you can be honest. Like, do you think that they're awful and done? Do you think that 7-8 wins? I mean, there's some wins on this schedule for sure, knowing the Jets you haven't played. The Patriots, you got another one against them. Raiders, there's some, I mean, the Rams, the Dolphins, I don't know if you're going to be at full strength next week, but the Dolphins, Rams, I would have picked the Dolphins. But I mean, the trajectory of both teams are going the other way.
Yeah.
So where do you end up this year, and what is your plans for what are you talking about on your show? And what are you hoping? Are you looking at draft position, or I guess break it all finally down for me? What happens this year with the Dolphins and what you're looking at?
Worst case scenario, I see them beating the bad teams, which isn't many. So, like, they'll probably beat the Jets once, because their Jets aren't that bad, but they are bad. And they'll probably beat the Patriots and the Raiders. Outside of that, they're, like you said, the Rams aren't that bad. And then, so worst case scenario, they get to 5 wins, which will get you a top 5 pick, or not top 5, top 10 pick at 5 wins. Best case scenario, they could maybe pull off getting to 10 wins, 9 wins. And, if a situation arises where like the Broncos and the Chargers and the Colts and, all these teams who are really benefiting off of playing bad teams, and they're going to start playing good ones, especially the Broncos, who they're riding on that defense, start losing and the Dolphins start winning, then there's a slim possibility of them making the playoffs. And if that, unfortunately for me as a Dolphin fan, if the Dolphins do make the playoffs, Chris Greer's not going to get fired, which kills me because that man should get fired regardless of what they do. But going forward, I honestly think they'll probably get to they'll get lucky with some games. They might get to 7 wins, 8 wins, and that's not going to do anything for you. They'll finish, and I honestly think they'll finish second place in the division again. I think the Jets are going to fall apart. I predicted this. You heard me on the SmackDown. I predicted this. Rodgers can't stay healthy. He's older. He's not Tom Brady. Tom Brady is a person of his own world. Rodgers isn't him. So I see the Jets falling apart. I wouldn't be surprised if the Patriots overtake the Jets in some, record standings. But for the Dolphins, especially if we get a top 10 pick, I start looking at quarterbacks. Not necessarily to replace Tua in 2025, but Tua's contract has an out after 2025. Like, it essentially was a 1-year prove it deal with an out. So yeah, he signed a 4-year extension, but there's outs. So I look at quarterbacks, Cam Ward, all these guys, if they are a possibility to move up and get them, you kind of do what the Minnesota Vikings did, or you kind of do what the Kansas City Chiefs did. They had Alex Smith, they brought in Mahomes. You know what I'm saying? So I would do that. We don't know if Tua can stay healthy again, and he gets another concussion. It don't matter if he can or wants to play again. He ain't going to be a Dolphin. So I would look at that. I would probably look at that and pass rusher and offensive lineman. Those are the 3 that I'm looking at. Some people have, I think his name is Jonty, that crazy running back going to Miami, which would be amazing, but it doesn't make sense with having Achane and Jalen right back there.
Yeah, you're right. The right move would be targeting quarterback. The wrong move is to continue the sunk cost fallacy of it, and putting a quarterback in there. Look at what Atlanta did, and I thought they maybe, Kirk Cousins is fine, but they felt the need to double up there as well and say, we need to do something different. Like, we're going to try twice. We're going to get a veteran, and we're going to. So I think that's the right move. Honestly, I hope the Dolphins get another quarterback in there. Does make it more challenging as May looks okay in New England. The Jets continue to jet, and they're going to continue to give Rodgers more power. And it's going to continue to fail. But I agree. I mean, I look through the Dolphins schedule, and I can see 7 and 8. I can victories, and I don't know if that helps you though. So, but being optimistic, I see 7 wins easily on the Dolphins schedule. But does that help you?
Of the pack again?
Probably not.
Yeah,
it really does not benefit you at Cleveland, which is somewhere I don't even like going in December as a Bills fan. It's a raucous place. And at New York, those are games that are probably going to determine a lot for the Dolphins' future. And winning those 2 could really put some stress on that draft position. So it's going to be a wild ride, and we'll talk about it on Mondays. You can catch us both on Mondays on the AFC SmackDown, where we go through all the AFC East games on the AFC Roundtable, and we break down a lot of different things over there. But Doug, where can we find you? Give us some final parting thoughts.
YouTube.com/DouglieDoWrong. Cover the Dolphins year round, whether it's training camp, whether it's free agency, draft, OTAs, all that stuff. You also follow me on Twitter. I hope that the Dolphins are somewhat competitive on Sunday. I remember the first game, week 2, it was like the beginning of the 4th quarter, and I'm like, can this game be over already? Like, I hope it's somewhat competitive, and like you take off at like the end of the game. But like I said, I fully predict. I don't even think by halftime the Dolphins have a chance. Like, I just don't have any faith in this defense, and Josh Allen just has our number. So we'll see. You guys might be able to like sit back and relax by halftime. I hope not, but that's the way I say it.
There we have it. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, man. It was really so thank you so much for being here. You can always find, we're going to put his channel in the description. I really do think you have 7 or 8 wins in there, though. So I think that Dolphins team's a little bit better than their record says. And I'm gonna make a wild prediction and say that it's a single-digit game this weekend.
Ooh.
Division games are tough, and even
Yeah.
the Bills have had their number. But I think that it's very possible that the Dolphins have a lot to prove. The coach does, the GM does. It's just a good place to prove it. It's against Seattle and Indy isn't a great place, or Arizona. But this week would be a good place to prove, like, hey, we're still here, by the way, whether we win or lose, whether we lose by 3, we're still going to be able to make a run at this. And I think that that's going to be Tua's mindset. So we really appreciate you coming on. What's your final score prediction?
40-20.
I will later in the show. I'll go through mine, but I will have it close. But we really appreciate you, Doug. We'll put your stuff in the description, and we appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man. Look forward to doing it again.
Yep. See you later.
Later.
Too bad we won't have a playoff matchup where we could bring him back on. Kevin, what are some of your initial reactions from some of the? I mean, it's a challenging environment down there right now. I do believe that team is better than their record. What is your opinion?
Yeah, I don't want to overlook the Dolphins because now that Tua is coming back, you would like to think that the offense is going to be back. But I mean, to the points that we were making, to the points that you guys were making, it might be too far gone, right? Like we might be too far into the season for Miami to make a jump. But that's the thing. Like, it's so interesting because the AFC is not what we thought it was going to be. And I think the 6 and or 7 seed is going to be probably a 10-win team, if not even single digits. Like you might be able to sneak in with 9 wins. If you're looking at teams like Indy, Denver, the Jets, the Dolphins, so even the Browns, what if they catch lightning in a bottle with Jameis? You never know with Jameis. So I'm not really counting any team out yet. And I think you brought this up last week. There's a very realistic possibility that the Bills could be the 2 seed hosting Joe Burrow and the Bengals as a 7 seed. And that scares me.
I don't like it. Even though their defense isn't what it once was, they definitely have their deficiencies. It's not the team we saw in the playoffs. It's still really good. Burrow's playing some great football. That is not a matchup that I want to entertain in a few months. So I'll take any of the other wild card teams right now. I do believe Baltimore ends up taking it from Pittsburgh. I'll even take Pittsburgh. I certainly do not want Cincinnati anywhere near Orchard Park in January. That is not a good weather late in the playoff, sure. But if that's week 1, that is not one I'm interested in having and seeing. That is a dangerous team if they can get in as the 7 seed. Much rather see Indy, Denver, a couple of those, LA late in the year here. A couple of those teams will definitely break some of our preferred matchups as it becomes more clear. But Miami they're always scary that they could turn it on, especially with that offense who look better. The defense is horrible. The problem right now in Miami, we talked about it, Kevin. The defense is tough. Like they have some injury issues. Their DBs aren't covering, linebacker issues, no pass rush. It's just not a competitive defense. We'll see if it travels on the road. If they were to beat someone like the Bills or anybody, they got to score in the 30s. Like it's like mandatory right now against good teams, at least medium tier teams. I just don't know that Miami's going to have enough to beat the Bills. But with it being a division game and most people counting the division out, I do think they have a last stand in them to put some pressure on the Bills, at least throughout the game, where I don't think it's going to be a laugher. I know Doug does. You may later, but I don't necessarily think it's going to be a laugher. So give us some of your keys to the game against the Dolphins. Like we just went over their defense being horrible. What are some of your quick takeaways? How the Bills can get to a really commanding position in the division 7 and 2, really be, if Houston wins tomorrow, really be 4+ games on everybody. That's an unprecedented number in early November.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, to think that the Bills could have the division clinched by Thanksgiving, that's almost an anomaly considering that analysts were projecting them to finish 3rd or 4th over the summer, and now they could run away with the division. And the crazy thing is, they're getting Von Miller back this week. Hopefully, Matt Milano will be returning. I'm just going to set the target date on that San Fran game on December 1st. And then within that month time span, so within the next 4 to 5 weeks as well, maybe an extra week for Dwayne Carter. But you're going to get Terrell Bernard back too. So when you add Von Miller, Matt Milano, a healthy Terrell Bernard, and a healthy Dwayne Carter to this defense of a team that is 6-2 and playing some dominant football right now, that's a scary combination for the rest of the league.
Right. Yeah, for that 49ers Rams Lions stretch, one that people at one point considered very hard. Now I would call it hard. I wouldn't call it very hard. I would call it just standard, like hard. You could be getting a whole slew of defensive reinforcements for that game. Luckily, the injury report today, a lot of fulls on there, a few questionables in terms of limited participants, but the Bills injury report looks clean to me. Definitely for this time of year, you're still going to be going into this game just missing, Carter, I guess, but Matt Milano. But you could be having the rest of your roster, which unfortunately you take at this time of year, as a early November game. You take having 1 to 2 defensive players out. Does look like the rest of their roster, including their entire offense, being able to suit up. That's a pretty good privilege to have in November against a divisional opponent where you could really bury them. You could really put them. We talked about this. You can make them sell. They could be sellers next week if they lose. There's no hope. If they can't beat the Bills, I think that's it. I think that's just too far out. You have too many AFC losses. Indy even has a tiebreaker on you if you're Miami. I just don't know what the hope is any longer with the way it's gone for you. So you'd be in a tough spot, losing record in the AFC, losing record in the division. They got to sell so the Bills can really put them into a situation to where if Miami loses, the Jets lose. It's tough for me to say that they'll give up on the season, but that's why I'm sure that we may get the best of the Dolphins this week. That's kind of what I'm worried about.
Yeah, long story short, the Bills can put the dagger in the Miami Dolphins this week. And it's week 9? Again, crazy to think, but those are the stakes. But to your point, they're going to come out desperate because they know that they could have the dagger put in them. And that could be the result of their season where they're saying, if they come in and they get a big win, that gives them the momentum and they can say, all right, maybe we can sneak in as a 6 or 7 seed. You lose. And to the points that you just laid out, you might be looking ahead to the 2025 season at the deadline next Tuesday.
It's a big game for the Dolphins. That's why I don't know that we're going to get a 21-point laugher. It's the writing's on the wall with their defense to be that. I'm just not going to predict that in a division game with a desperate team that knows you and may be able to at least try to do something to catch you off guard, at least offensively, to catch the Bills. The Bills defense is playing really great. Number 2 DVOA run defense. That's not something most people probably think about when you think of the Bills right now. But what they've been able to do in short yardage situations, having the 4th best red zone defense, how good they are in 3rd and 4th down, how good they are in 3rd and down, short yardage, some of the best in the league. And they're really good situationally. Will that keep up? We'll have to see the second half of the year, but the Bills are very good situationally defensively right now. That's why they're DVOA, and how many points they create negatively for the opposing offense is really high. And what their corners have been able to do. It's been getting Vaughn back now. I would presume at least to be able to do his normal 3rd down rushing the quarterback route, a role. He won't need too much time to do that. It's not like he plays 100% of the snaps anyways. He's only going to play his usual 30 to 40%. The Bills don't have a ton of holes, Kevin. Even though trade deadline is ahead of us. We've talked about safety. We talk about a couple more positions later. Anything else you want to construct a game plan? What do you want to do about the Dolphins game real quick?
Not to backtrack, but I do want to hit a couple points about the Seahawks game, and that'll kind of transition us into Miami.
Okay.
Did you mention anything about the Seahawks game, or Doug was on right from the beginning, right?
No, we talked all Dolphins so far, their recap and whatnot.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to go back to that because I think it's interesting how the Bills held the Seahawks to 233 total yards and just 32 rushing yards while forcing 2 turnovers. And as I said with my tweet on Sunday during the postgame, keep in mind that Seattle was a top passing offense in the league going into the week, and they were 8th in scoring, averaging over 25 points per game. Huge credit to Sean McDermott and Bobby Babbage for having a great defensive game plan, and then to the players for executing it. I know the Seahawks were without DK Metcalf, but don't forget the Bills were without Bernard and Dwayne Carter. So we don't need to touch on the Seahawks too much, but I do want to hit a couple points that, again, will kind of segue us into the Dolphins, because that Dolphins game in week 2 this year, that was pretty much the first game this year, at least, where we got a glimpse into that Sean McDermott, Bobby Babbage combo, where they really, really impressed me and pretty much everyone else for that matter when someone like a Jamarcus Ingram, a UDFA from UB, not Alabama, not Georgia, not Ohio State, the University of Buffalo is coming in and just totally running circles around Tua and that offense. And they had no answers. The way he was able to deploy him in those dime packages. So between what they did last week in Seattle, I think you're coming home to face a reeling Dolphins team. Man, this could get ugly quick if they play their cards right once again.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, based on what they've been able to do, the makings are it could get ugly. I just think the circumstance is going to work against the ugly score prediction. The Bills have played the Dolphins particularly well in Buffalo. If it was in Miami, it could be even a little scarier, even though the Bills dominated down there. The weather's going to be nice, so it's not going to be crazy. So that's always plus for Tua, how bad he is under 50 degrees. That's definitely a hope that the Bills generally get against Tua as the weather. Yeah, I mean, I sure do. Against the Dolphins, at least. I don't generally wish that, depending on the opponent. Dome teams for sure, but 55 and partly cloudy right now. I just wish it was even a little colder than that. Would be great, but does look decent out, at least in early November. So they're going to catch a break there. I just think they're desperate. What Achan's been able to do against the Bills in the past, they could keep it close that way. Mostert has been good against the Bills in history. I'm over here touting the Bills' run defense and how good they played against the Titans and how good they played against the Seahawks. I mean, their numbers are jacked up. Like their run defense has been really good. It's been good in different circumstances. We can sit here and talk about it all we want. But third best DVOA, minus 24% against the rush, meaning that every run play that a team runs, the Bills are 25% better than average against the run. They've been dominant in stretches against the run. They've had some big lapses against Derrick Henry. They just didn't have the right personnel. It wasn't a great game for them. But other than that, they've been really good against the run for the most part ever since that game. Really, all the numbers would point to it. So we'll see what they do against the Dolphins. The Bills are probably going to do what they always do and let the Dolphins run a little bit. So we're probably going to get a little bit frustrated because that's how they play the Dolphins. They let Mostert and Achane get theirs, but they know how to shut down that Mike McDaniel pass offense. And they're going to probably feel pretty good against this weakened Miami defense that doesn't look very good on paper. Anything else you want to say about the Titans, though? Or excuse me, the Seahawks, though?
Yeah, the other thing that I'll say is Keon Coleman is becoming a rising star here. And we talked about this for the last couple of weeks about how the arrival of Amari Cooper is so huge for his growth and development. And you're seeing that right before your very eyes. And really for the rest of this offense, too, because Cooper had one catch for 3 yards, I think, or no, 8 yards, because I was playing against him in fantasy. He had 0.8 point. No, it was 1 for 3. Yeah, because I think it was like a half point per reception. But either way,
3 yards.
Yeah, 1 catch, 3 yards. And he was pretty much invisible, but he was visible from the perspective of he opened everything else up for the other receivers, right? Because the DBs were paying attention to Amari Cooper because you know what Cooper can do. And when that happens, that's when you have Khalil Shakir leading the way with 9 catches for 107 yards. Keon Coleman, 5 catches, 70 yards, and a great touchdown when he little broed Tariq Woolen. Dawson Knox, 2 catches for 50 yards. Kincaid, 4 for 31 and a touchdown. James Cook, 17 carries, 111 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Ray Davis, 6 carries for 29 yards, so he averaged 4.8 per carry. So, like, everyone is, maybe I shouldn't say everybody is eating again. Maybe we're tired of that catchphrase, but everyone is contributing now because I think it's really because of Amari Cooper's arrival here and just the pressure that he takes off of the rest of these guys, right? Because now Coleman doesn't have to feel like he needs to be that wide receiver 1 anymore. He's settling into that wide receiver 2 role. And now this is when I think he can really, hit that growth spurt, if you will. And the thing that I'll say about this game is the Bills offense really wasn't the Bills offense, and they dominated Miami back in week 2. Now you have Amari Cooper, you have Keon Coleman playing the way he is. Even the rest of the guys that I just mentioned here with Shakir, Kincaid, and Knox, Ray Davis really wasn't part of the offense back in week 2. Again, this could get ugly fast. It should bode well for the Bills, but this is a divisional opponent, and they're going to play like their hair's on fire.
For sure. There's a lot to take away from the Seahawks game. The Bills are really good. They're winning 21+ in back-to-back weeks. The makings are there for them to continue this stretch. The weird stretch that Josh Allen has on daylight savings time, where the Bills have lost 3 straight games after daylight savings time, and his numbers are 1 touchdown to 5 interceptions over the last 3 years. It's an interesting run for the Bills when the clocks turn back. So we'll see if any of that has an effect on this game at all. But it's all there for the Bills to be really good, to be really effective. Just the only thing that always has is the desperation factor. That's what a lot of people were saying about the Jags a few weeks ago. And that's what we have going forward as we look forward to the Dolphins game. But first and foremost, I want to shout out to our show sponsors, the Summit Center, to some of the best autism care in Western New York. Always check out the Summit Center and appreciate all the work that they've done in our community.
Also want to say thank you to Dave Dengler and the Larson-Timko Funeral Home. Larson-Timko Funeral Home offering 100% fully guaranteed price and pre-arranged funeral plans with live streaming available. You can give them a call at 716-679-9000 or visit their website at larsontimkofuneralhome.com.
You have it. Thank you to our show sponsors as always. But it's time to get into some of our continue our final segment on the Dolphins and get into how to beat the Dolphins and get our score predictions in here shortly. And then maybe even talk about some trade scenarios here with the trade deadline being 6 days away. Brandon Beane did come out and say, going to be looking. It's got to fit in the salary. If he was a betting man, the odds wouldn't be great, but he's going to see what he can get done in the next 6 days. So to me, that sounds like he could work the phones. He needs to find a trade partner with somebody that would have an efficient contract to look forward to. But let's get that game plan going, Kevin. What are the Bills' success to victory? What does it look like against a pretty weakened Dolphins defense and getting right Dolphins offense, who was decent for the most part?
Yeah, so in terms of total yards here, I know these numbers are probably skewed because the offense has just been so shaky, but Miami does have the 6th total defense in terms of total yards this year. They are 5th against the pass, 16th against the rush, and 16th in scoring, giving up 22.4 points per game. So, I mean, they have been pretty good overall on defense, but again, it's so hard when you don't have the starting quarterback and maybe you're put in bad field position. The defense is getting tired. They're out there longer than the offense. So it'll be interesting to see what the injury report is, but I think this is essentially a Josh Allen game, right? Just because he's so dominant against the Dolphins. Now, the good thing was last time against the Dolphins, he only had 145 total yards and 1 touchdown, and the Bills were still able to win decidedly. So that was a great thing to see, that he didn't have to put the team on his back or put the cape on like he has in the past. So I think they do have many ways that they can attack this Dolphins team. But I think when it's all said and done, this is going to be Josh Allen trying to carve up this Dolphins team once again.
Yeah, and advanced analytics don't look good for the Dolphins defense. Conversely to your numbers, 25th overall pass defense, 28th overall against the rush. The Bills are going to be able to continue that game plan of running the ball like we've seen in weeks past. It's not a very good run defense. Overall, 27th DVOA defense. That doesn't have anything to do with Tua. It very much so speaks to the volumes of them being 9% worse than an average on a play-to-play basis for the Miami defense. And now they could be without Holland. We went through the injury report with Doug a little bit earlier, but it's in a rough spot with their pass rushers obviously being out. Kader Koh, who's their nickel usually, he's been awful and off the field. Obviously, you're going to get Jalen Ramsey and Kendall Fuller, Marcus May and Jordan Poyer, but if Holland's off the game, that's a major loss. David Long Jr. has been the worst linebacker in the league by a lot of his metrics. Jordan Brooks has been decent, but that defense in large has really struggled. And Sealer is probably, I think, one of their best players in my personal opinion. Calais Campbell's played really well. He's a big bite out of that defense as well. So with no Jalen Phillips, obviously no Chubb, there's just not enough talent there. Jalen Ramsey's going to win his reps occasionally. He's still pretty good. But ultimately, I just don't think there's enough defensively, especially if the Bills are able to run the ball against that poor run defense. There's not going to be much there for the Dolphins, in my personal opinion. And then on offense, in terms of the Dolphins offense, I think they're going to be a little stingy. I think they're going to do some things right, and they're going to make it competitive. I think they're going to do their best to keep it a 1-score game for the most of the night. And I think that they will. I really do believe that it'll come out to be a 1-score game. They're going to battle. And even if it's a score late that brings it to 1 score or not, I do think that it's going to be a 1-score game at the very end of it. at least put enough pressure on where I don't believe the Bills are going to get a third straight laugher. But we'll have to see. I do think that we may see a one-score game come into play here. Division, they're desperate. They're going to give it everything to stay alive in this and not be put into a position to where they're sellers at the trade deadline against teams that are looking for potential options for their rosters as the trade deadline approaches on Tuesday. Time for some score predictions. Okay, we're going to get some score predictions of this game in here first. And we're going to start with you. What do you got going on? And Doug said a 20-point win for the Bills. Where are you at?
I have Buffalo winning 37-13. I just think that there are too many holes in this Dolphins defense. And I think that McDermott and Babbage can always scheme something up against Tua and the Dolphins offense. And again, to our points that we made throughout the whole night, I know this can be a tough divisional game, but I just have that feeling that Buffalo is going to run away with it. Maybe it'll be close at first. But again, I think the fact that the Bills were able to win in such a dominant fashion in week 2, and check out this box score real quick. Khalil Shakir led the way, 5 catches, 54 yards. The next leading receiver was Ty Johnson with 33 yards. Granted, it was just 1 catch, an incredible play from Josh. Kincaid had 4 for 33. James Cook, 1 for 17. Curtis Samuel, 1 for 3. Hollins didn't have a catch. MVS didn't have a catch. Coleman was catchless. So that's huge right there. Keon Coleman was catchless. Now you have him playing like a legit wide receiver too. You have Amari Cooper. You have Kincaid and Knox looking into form, playing the part. You have James Cook and Ray Davis running well, and Ty Johnson. I just think that there are way too many pieces and weapons here for the Dolphins to keep track of. So I see Buffalo winning in another dominant fashion on Sunday, 37-13.
Yeah, there's definitely
and putting the dagger in Miami. Like in the beginning of November, they could seriously put the dagger in them and force them to be sellers at the deadline.
There's certainly a path to that. Like there's a lot of things that point to that. I'm just, I'm going to go off that they're going to be a tough out for the Bills. I think that they're going to play really hard. Their offense is going to be a little bit better than 13 points. We'll see. But there's definitely a path to what you're saying. Like I think that there's analytics I would point to that, but I do think that they showed up, they got a week under their belt, and this is going to be a desperate week. This is going to be their potential first stint at what could be a playoff game for them, to see if they have any type of talent. And to the Bills, it's not that to the Bills. So let's see if they can get up. I think it's strange that Josh Allen's lost 3 straight games off of daylight savings. The week he has his Halloween party. I don't know if any of that kind of stuff matters, but they've lost 3 straight games when the clock gets set back. So we'll see.
We should just abolish daylight savings. It's just stupid.
I agree.
You're just going to spring ahead anyways. I need an extra hour to work.
Right. So I agree with that part. But I got the Bills winning. 28-21 is the number I've jumped out to so far. And I think they're going to put some pressure on. There's going to be moments in the game where you're like, this is closer than we need it to be. So I do believe that that's the way it's going to go, Kevin. Any final thoughts on the Dolphins? Any final Dolphins thoughts, at least for now?
Yep. So Josh Allen's career stats versus Miami. He has a career passer rating of 110.0, 3,502 yards, 34 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions in 13 games. And then you add the 5 rushing touchdowns. So he has almost 4,000 total yards and 39 touchdowns against Miami. And then he had the 3 in the playoffs as well. So he always dominates the Dolphins. And I just hope that that can continue this Sunday.
There you have it. Well, he has been dominant. We'll see what happens in terms of how this one plays out, but the Bills could really, and then the Houston Jets game tomorrow where the Jets are favored. The division could be over. I know we talked about the Dolphins being up 3. The difference was the Dolphins, we talked with Doug, they had a terrible stretch of injuries. 2 was bad in cold weather. The Bills had a great run. The Dolphins didn't. 3 games without the tiebreakers. No. I just don't think I think that's a little bit different. 4 to 5 games. The difference was the Bills had the tiebreaker on the Dolphins last year. The Dolphins aren't going to have that luxury. Neither are the Jets. So ultimately, it's just going to be a lot different of a run where the Bills are going to get the Patriots twice at the end of the year, if they even need it. We'll see, how early the Bills can rest their players if they can. It's a big game. The Bills know they could take a commanding lead in this whole thing. So we'll have to see how this all plays out. So that's that. So we'll see how this all goes. Kevin, it's up to you now to break down your official trade targets for the Bills trade deadline. I'm going to get out of here. Really appreciate everybody tuning in here, but Kevin's going to bring you some great action with who he thinks the Bills can target in this upcoming trade deadline. So we appreciate everybody. We'll catch you guys next week to talk if there's any emergency trades. I'll be on here. Kevin will be on here. We'll be discussing those, but Kevin's going to bring you over some of his top trade targets as the deadline approaches.
All right. Well, that being said, it'll be me and you. There we go for the rest of the night. We do have the Yankees. I was going to say tipping off here, but that's the wrong sport. But it'll be first pitch any moment now. So I have to keep some updates on that. But I do want to talk about these trade targets because this is going to be a crucial weekend here for the Bills because there could be a lot of players or positions who I think that they could go after. You know, Kevin mentioned that a little bit earlier. So I want to talk about some of my targets. You know, I was going through some depth charts last night and just trying to formulate some ideas. So I'll give you some of mine, and then I want to hear from you guys as well. I was also thinking, too, if you have any fantasy questions, we don't really talk fantasy much. So hit me up with those because I was going through the waiver wire last night. Probably too long, you know, probably stayed up too long looking at the waiver wire and trying to think about some trades. But that got me thinking about fantasy. So if you guys want to talk about some drops or ads or whether you should trade this player or whether you should start or sit this player, let me know because I want to talk about it. So thank you to everyone who is in here so far. And thank you again to our sponsors. But with the trade deadline coming up on Tuesday, I think it's a 4 p.m. deadline, election day. Like, why would you do that? It makes no sense. But either way, we have a huge day on Tuesday between who are the Bills going to acquire and then who we're going to vote for as well. So November 5th is a big day. And there have been some trades going on as well. You know, I saw some people in the comments who were talking about Kansas City already making some moves. They got Josh Uche. We know that they got DeAndre Hopkins already. So they're all in. They're looking for the three-peat, right? And with the Bills playing as well as they've been, I think that this is a time when you can really be buyers. And for as much as people were saying that this could be that reload year, you're just going to reset, you're going to install this youth movement, right? And then you really hit the ground running in 2025, especially once you have more salary cap, more draft picks. Well, I think this is a year when the Bills are hitting the ground running, and you're looking at the emergence of these guys quintessentially here with Keon Coleman. I mean, that is a great example of how you're like, oh, okay, I guess we have something here. Let's just go for it, right? Like, not that the Bills said we don't want to go for it at the beginning of the year, but there was probably always that question in the back of everyone's heads where it's like, how good is this team, right? You're talking about losing guys like Stephon Diggs and Poyer and Micah Hyde, Trey White. And to be fair, Gabe Davis, Mitch Morse, a lot of these guys have been grading out very poorly with PFF. And now Diggs suffered that torn ACL. So now it just seems like the Bills played their cards right. And they can really go for it this year. And you're thinking, all right, you're just a couple of plays away from the Chiefs last year, right? Like, they've been there so many times. Like, they're just so close. What is going to be that one factor, right? Is it going to be Tyler Bass making the field goals? Is it going to be Sean McDermott in the late game scenarios making the right call? Is it going to be Bobby Babbage setting up the right defensive scheme? You know, anything. But I think the Bills really are close. It's just, what can they do to get over that hump? And I think that with the deadline here, you want to do everything that you can to ensure that you can get over the hump. So you're not looking at someone like Trent Sherfield coming up with the biggest drop last year in the divisional round, right? Like, you don't want that again. That's why I'm happy that it doesn't have to be Mac Hollins in that spot this year because the Bills already got Amari Cooper. So let me try to go through these comments here because, not going to lie, it's hard to multitask sometimes. So let's start with Joey here. He says, what do the Bills need? A safety, corner, edge rusher, linebacker? I'm going to say safety. I think I'm going to hesitate to say that they need one because I think that it is a solid room, but I think that they can upgrade, right? Because DeMar has been solid, but he's shown that he probably has a ceiling. You know, as I always say, he was a 6th-round pick. So that means that the draft told you that he wasn't going to be this highly touted prospect, right? He didn't have these gaudy numbers or this big RAS score just popping out at you. Now, to be fair, Christian Benford was also a 6th-round pick, and he's turned out to be one of the best corners in the league. But I just think that the way that DeMar plays, he probably reached his ceiling. He knows the system. He's good. You know, he's technically sound for the most part, maybe take some bad angles here and there, but you know, I just don't know if he's going to be a Micah Hyde in his prime or Jordan Poyer in his prime, right? And that's okay. But the question is, can you get someone else to fill that void? You would like to think that it's going to be Cole Bishop eventually, but it looks like he's not ready. We saw that in the Texans game. Taylor Rapp seems like he's safety one. So you would like to think that you have someone there. And I think that DeMar is pretty much the gap holder. He's a bridge gap until Bishop is ready. And then you have the Mike Edwards situation, which is just so weird when I don't mean to sound like a broken record if you've listened to the show here, but I really thought that it was going to be Mike Edwards and Taylor Rapp this year. And Edwards was going to be the placeholder until Bishop was ready. And DeMar would be that fourth safety. But it's pretty much been the opposite. So I really don't know what's going on with Edwards. And the only thing that I can think of was the injuries that he suffered in the offseason and over the summer just set him back to the point where he never got caught up to speed. And now he's just a healthy scratch. So Kevin and I talked about some potential trades last week. And, we threw out Grant Delpit or Rodney McLeod with the Browns. And we were saying, what if you just include Mike Edwards, right? Because it seems like he's pretty much doing nothing. And the only reason that he's going to be able to get in is if the Bills have 1 or 2 injuries, because they did have some injuries in the Texans game and he still didn't crack I think he did get a jersey that day, but he never saw the field, just playing special teams. So I wonder if they could do something where it's just like, we'll give you Mike Edwards for Rodney McLeod and a draft pick or something like that, right? So maybe you're not moving the needle much. It's not like you're going out there and getting, I'm just thinking of the first name that I can think of, like a Justin Simmons, who's in Atlanta now, because I remember everyone was talking about him over the summer. So it's not like you're getting an all-pro safety or anything, but you're essentially just kind of building up that depth, swapping a player in, swapping a player out, and saying, okay, now we feel better. We solidified our back end. So like maybe they do something like that. Maybe they do trade Mike Edwards, or to Kevin's point last week, if you have that veteran safety already, maybe you don't even need to make a trade and you just need to simply give Mike Edwards a jersey to see what he can do, right? So, again, I want to push back by saying that the Bills need a safety, but I think that they could definitely use one. A corner, I think they're good because I'm still pretty high on Kyer Elam. I think he's done a lot of things well for the Bills. So I think if you have Douglas and Benford healthy, that's one of the best duos in the league. Then you have Kyer Elam and Jamarcus Ingram. I'll admit, I didn't think that Ingram was going to be this good, but the way that McDermott's been able to coach him up and put him in the right scenarios and situations, I think I'm pretty good with the corner situation. And the Bills do have a couple of corners on their practice squad if they want to call them up as well. Edge rusher, that's a position that you could always add to. I think it does help that you're getting Vaughn back this week, so that's essentially an addition right there, right? Where you don't have to trade for someone because you would like to think that Vaughn is fresh coming off of that suspension. And in the meantime, you had guys like Javon Solomon and Casey Tuhill stepping up. Greg Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, they've been playing well. And then Dwan Smoot too. So, I mean, between those 5 guys right there, then you get Vaughn back in. I don't know if there's room for an edge rusher, but then again, you could always just drop Casey Tuhill and say, okay, well, player X is better than Tuhill, right? I guess player X for this case would be Zadarius Smith. I know that his name has been floated around in trade rumors, and I believe he signed a 2-year contract extension worth $23 million. Let me try to pull up his contract here because it'll make things easier rather than trying to do it from the top of my head. But Kevin threw his name out there last week, and I've seen some people talking about him on Twitter as well. And if the Browns are in sell mode, then, I mean, this could really make sense because I believe it is a very tradable contract. And the base salary is, his cap hit is only $5.2 million, and he has a base salary of $1.2 million. So that is very tradable, and there is a potential out in his contract in 2025. So if the Bills do want to get an edge rusher, I mean, that's kind of like Amari Cooper, right? Where it's like, how is the price so good for a player of that quality? So if they do want to get Zadarius Smith, who has 5 sacks this year, then I would totally take that over Casey Tuhill, right? Because Tuhill is nice, but if you're trying to get over that hump, then why not try to do better, right? And then to this point right here, Myles Garrett from Cleveland. I don't know for sure, but I thought that Cleveland said that he's untradeable, that they're not listening to offers for him. So, I mean, sure. that would be great, right? But I'm not even going to spend that much time thinking about it or talking about it, just because I don't think that the Browns are going to trade him, number one. Number two, I don't think that they're going to just keep selling all these star players to Buffalo, right? Like, we're not the Scranton Wilkes-Barre or we're not the Yankees to their Scranton Wilkes-Barre, right? Or in these terms, like, we're not the Blue Jays to their Bisons. So they can't just be our farm team all the time. That's why I think like Rodney McLeod could make sense, just because he's like a depth safety on a 1-year deal. But I don't know. That Myles Garrett, no, that's too far. Zadarius Smith is already pushing it because they got Amari Cooper. But it is intriguing, because if Cleveland doesn't win, that's why this weekend is so crucial, because if they lose, they go to 1-7, and then it's like, okay, well, maybe we can't get in the playoffs after all. Maybe Jameis isn't as good as we thought. And you don't want to rush to conclusions, but sometimes you have to with the trade deadline being on Tuesday, and they might be more prone to selling some of these veterans off. So you could get them. I just don't think that Myles Garrett will be available. To John's point here, yeah, Javon Solomon, he could be used more as well. And he's been pretty fresh for the most part this year, so they could really use him more. And then what was the other question that was on there? Oh, linebacker. I think it was Joey who asked about a linebacker. I don't see that, because, again, you're getting reinforcements with Matt Milano coming back. And the way that Dorian Williams has been playing, and if you get Terrell Bernard back healthy, Balen Spector, I know he has his faults, but he played pretty solid Sunday in Seattle. They still have Nicholas Morrow, Joe Andreessen. I know Joe Andreessen probably isn't better than some of these linebackers out there who could be on the block, but I feel like he has a very high ceiling, and he flashed a lot in the preseason, and you probably don't want to test that in the playoffs, right? Like, you don't want to say, hey, Buffalo Joe, can you go defend Travis Kelce? Instead of calling AJ Klein out of his RV, can we just trust you? So you probably don't want to resort to that. But again, I really like the linebacker room this year, because I'm thinking that Milano is going to return. McDermott said today that he should be on track, and like everything is looking good so far. Yes, Dorian Williams is a beast. He was only trailing Robert Spillane by 1 tackle for the league lead in tackles a couple weeks ago. I think he only had 2 this past Sunday, so he dipped a little bit. But yeah, he has been playing very, very well. Still lacks a little bit in pass coverage, but I think the Bills definitely found something there. Another 3rd-round linebacker between Dorian Williams and Terrell Bernard, 3rd-round linebackers who probably, I don't want to say were discredited at the time, but a lot of people were like, why are we taking another linebacker again? 2 years in a row, a 3rd-year linebacker or 3rd-round linebacker, and now it's paying off, right? Like, you're seeing why Bean wanted to go after these players, and it's pretty cool. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple more that I wrote down. I'll try to pull up some of their contracts and their stats in between, and I'll also try to go through your comments. But again, I was going through some of these guys last night, and I was like, you know what? Let's just put a little list together here, right? Because I really think that the Bills are going to do something. I know they already got the big fish in Amari Cooper, and that's why I don't think that they're going to get another big fish, especially from the same team as in Myles Garrett. So that's why I think at the very most that they can get Zadarius Smith. So that's the first target. Now, this is in no specific order, but I'll just say Zadarius Smith. I think that, he could be a very solid piece to this defensive line. Again, that might mean that you have to drop Casey Toohill, but if you're getting Zadarius Smith, as I pull up his stats here, I mean, that is a proven pass rusher. He's 32 years old, still playing at a high level. And he has 5 sacks this year. Came into the league with the Ravens in 2015. Then he signed with Green Bay. And there were a couple of years in there with the Packers, 2019 and 2020, when he was a Pro Bowler and made 2nd team All-Pro in 2020. 13.5 sacks in 2019, 12.5 sacks in 2020. And then with Minnesota in 22, he had 10 sacks. And again, he was a Pro Bowler, All-Pro, 44 tackles. And then last year with Cleveland, 5.5 sacks. This year, he already has 5. So again, with the $1.2 million base salary, $5.2 million cap hit, I think that is a tradable contract. To John's question here, when is Milano coming back? Oh, wait, when Milano is back, how do they use Dorian? I mean, that's a great question, because that's a good problem to have, right? When you can go 3 linebackers now. I mean, maybe they do that. Maybe they just I know you don't want to take Taron Johnson off the field, but let's just say that they're playing the Ravens, right? And they get matched up with Derrick Henry again. Now, maybe that is a one time where you say, look, Taron, we love you. You're one of the best slot corners in the league, but we're going to put Dorian Williams on the field now because we have Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard healthy. Let's put you out there because you are good at defending the run. You already saw Derrick Henry once this year, and we're just going to continue to coach you up. They could really switch to that 4-3 base defense come playoff time if they run into a juggernaut like Derrick Henry or someone else for that matter. And really, I mean, he's one of one. I can't really think of San Fran, Detroit, they have good rushing attacks, but that would be for the Super Bowl, right? And let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. But I mean, like there are some good rushing attacks. Joe Mixon with the Texans, but he's not Derrick Henry, you know. Pacheco, if he comes back with the Chiefs, sure, but you know how to defend Kansas City. It goes through Patrick Mahomes. It doesn't go through Isaiah Pacheco. So, yeah, I mean, I think Derrick Henry's one of one, and then that's probably the best answer for how they use Dorian, just to like in knowing run situations, when you know, hey, they're going to try to pound it here with Derrick Henry or even, you know, one of the guys that I just mentioned. If you know that Isaiah Pacheco is getting it, maybe that's when you could put Dorian out there. So you could probably platoon some of these guys. All right, so moving on here with the trade targets here. I'll answer this one too. Joey says he read an article that the Bills should be heard to sign Trey White, and because he's getting older, transfer him. I don't think that they would want to transfer him. I know Trey's definitely slipped off, and it's it's a hard pill to swallow, right? Because he's such a fan favorite. And not gonna lie, like I kind of thought about it too, where it's like, would you want to give up a late day 3 pick to get Trey back here? I don't think you can do that, right? Like the Band-Aid's already been ripped off. And if anything, like Trey will probably come back and like, I don't know if he's a Wall of Fame or anything, but he's definitely beloved. So it'd probably be one of those where maybe he comes back in the community. He goes to games, right? Like a Ryan Fitzpatrick, something like that. But I think the book's kind of closed on Trey White. And I like transitioning him to safety. I don't think so, just because of like the way he plays and like the injuries that he's sustained. I just don't see it happening. But yeah, I did hear that report that the Rams could potentially shop Trey White. I also saw the rumor that they could potentially be shopping Matthew Stafford. But again, I mean, to what we've been saying the whole night about how one game can change a lot, they beat the Vikings last week. Suddenly they're in the thick of it for the NFC West, right? The Bills beat the Seahawks, and now you got a logjam between those 4 teams out west. So, yeah, I think as much as it pains me to say, it's probably done for Trey White. Okay, so moving on now. Defensive tackle. I think defensive tackle could be a position that the Bills could look to upgrade. Now, Dwayne Carter is coming back within 4 to 6 weeks, they said. So you would like to think that he's going to be ready for the stretch run. But if they want to say, you know what, we want to build up this defensive line, right? We want to really get some guys who can win their one-on-one battles, win up in the trenches. And I'm thinking back to these guys that they signed, like, or trade for, like a Linval Joseph, right? Where it's like, hey, we just need a big body to come in and plug up the middle. I don't think they have to do that this year, especially if Ed Oliver and Daquan can stay healthy. And I like what Austin Johnson's been doing. And I really liked what Dwayne Carter was doing too. But I think that they can be okay with just leaving Eli Ankou up there. You know, they elevated him from the practice squad, so they can put him on the active roster until Dwayne Carter's ready. But if they do want to go after someone, I'm looking at Jeremiah Ledbetter from the Jaguars, because they are another team who could be in sell mode. And I think that Ledbetter, you know, we talked to Jared Feinberg back in week 3, and he was saying how the Jags have a rotation on their defensive line, and that's pretty much what the Bills do, right? They have that rotation. So as I pull up his stats here, he came into the league in 2017, played with Detroit, then Tampa, and he's been with Jacksonville the last 2.5 years. So this is his 3rd year in a Jags uniform. He's played in 6 games this year, started 3 of them. So that kind of shows that split, right? How sometimes he starts, sometimes he rotates in as a backup, but he has 17 tackles and a sack this year. And I think that on a 1 year, I think it was only a $2 million deal, roughly somewhere in that vicinity. I think that could definitely be an idea for the Bills. Again, just if they want to help plug up the middle there and they just want to bolster up that defensive line, regardless of Dwayne Carter, right? Because if you think that Carter's going to come back and be healthy, is that enough to stop Derrick Henry if you have to play them in the playoffs? And that's why you go get someone like a Jeremiah Ledbetter. Moving down the list here, I wrote down Rodney McLeod. I talked about him. He's another, veteran safety. He's been playing with the Browns this year. Another cheap contract, so it's a tradable contract. And I think that, we talked about Grant Delpit. They signed him to a 3-year, $36 million contract extension. So I don't think that they're going to want to give up on him already. He's a pretty young player. They have Juan Thornhill and Ronnie Hickman as well. So I think McLeod could be the one player that you could pluck off here. And again, I don't know how many times I want to keep going back to Cleveland, but I mean, this is a guy I didn't even realize that McLeod has been in the league since 2012. He came up with the St. Louis Rams. They were called St. Louis back at the time. Then he went to Philly for 6 years, played a year with Indy, and he's been in Cleveland the last couple of years. So 8 games for him, 2 starts, 27 tackles. Serviceable backup. Can he be an upgrade over Mike Edwards? Maybe. I think that he could. Is he an upgrade over DeMar Hamlin? I think some people would say that he is. I'm not going to go that far because I would need to see a little bit more tape on him, but I think that could definitely be an option. So far we have 3 players: Zadarius Smith, an edge rusher; Jeremiah Ledbetter, the defensive tackle; and Rodney McLeod, the safety. We got a comment here that says the Bills should trade for Eric Armstead. This is a better question for Kevin. If Kevin and I come on before the trade deadline, we'll talk about this, because I remember that I think it was down to Buffalo and Jacksonville. I think those are the final 2 teams to try to sign Eric Armstead in the offseason. And I think Adam Schefter even said that he chose Jacksonville over Buffalo as that final team. And it was a huge contract too. I remember when it came out, we were just like, okay, no, he's good, but we're not going to give him that much money, right? Yeah, 3 years, $43.5 million. So I'm not trying to pay him that, but I think Kevin was tweeting about it the other day, and that might be a reworkable deal as well. So I'm going to say no for now. I think Ledbetter makes more sense considering the fit and the contract, because let's not forget, you have Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones, right? So is Eric Armstead just supposed to come in and supplant those guys? Like, they're both playing pretty well for the most part. That's why I don't see that being a fit for the Bills, but could be wrong. I did put Andre Sisco going back to, actually sticking with Jacksonville. Because again, if they're in sell mode and if the Bills want to upgrade at safety, he could be an option, but they're pretty thin in the defensive backfield. So I don't know if they're going to be that apt to try to move him, but Andrew Wingard is coming back off of his knee injury. So maybe that could be an out where Jacksonville says, you know what, let's just continue to build for the future. We traded Cam Robinson yesterday. Let's just go all in and try to build for that future. And sure, we'll take a 4th, 5th, whatever round pick, 6th round pick for Andre Sisco. That's more of a distant, I don't want to say a dream. It's not like he's that good. I think he definitely is a solid player, but I think it would be, I think it probably makes more sense that you could probably get McLeod ahead of Sisco, but what do I know? Who knows what Jacksonville is going to do? I wrote down Andres Pete too. He's the left tackle. He signed a 1-year, $2 million deal with the Raiders, and the Raiders aren't going anywhere either. So I think that's the key, right? Like, you got to look at teams in the standings who aren't going anywhere. Cleveland, Jacksonville, the Raiders, Tennessee, Carolina. Now, some of these teams, maybe if they get hot, they could sneak into that 7 seed in either conference. I mean, Carolina's not going anywhere. But for the most part, you want to look at teams with the losing record, even like Miami or the Jets or the Patriots. I know you don't want to trade with an in-division team. I do have a trade with the Patriots coming up, though, that I'll get to. But I think that Andres Pete could make sense because he's not going to be part of the future for the Raiders, right? He's just a serviceable backup at this point. And with Tylen Grable still being shelved with an injury, the Bills could see themselves as being kind of thin at that tackle position. So they might say, hey, we'll give up a 3rd round pick, or not 3rd round, a day 3 pick, a late round pick, I should say, to go get Andres Pete, who, let me check his age, because I don't think he's that old yet, right? It's not like this is a Jason Peters by any means. But, you know, he spent all that time with New Orleans. And yeah, now he's only 30 years old, actually turns 31 on Monday. So that could be a nice birthday present, right? Send him to Buffalo, put him in the playoffs, right? He can be paid to be the backup to Deion Dawkins and be Josh Allen's blindside. So that's an option. And I did mention I have one more. So I believe this is 6 now. If you want to include this as number 5 and take off Cisco, I mean, I guess that kind of depends on what you think about the chances of being able to try to pry him off of the Jags roster. I think Cisco was just drafted in 21 too, so he might be one of those players that the Jags would try to build their team around. As I pull up his stats just to make sure. Yeah, he's 24 years old, born in New York City. Oh, he went to Syracuse. I didn't realize that. But yeah, so he's still on his rookie deal. So he was drafted in 2021. So the last player that I have here is KJ Osborne with the Patriots. And again, I know you probably don't want to go after an in-division team here, an in-division rival, but I think that there is a logjam at the wide receiver position in New England. And the thing is, they don't have like that clear-cut number 1, right? So I feel like they just took a bunch of receivers and just kind of threw, you know what, at the fan and said, let's see what sticks for Drake May. So I'm not saying that these are all bad receivers, but, you know, they drafted a few, they signed a few, they still have a few from leftovers from over the last few years. And as I pull up their depth chart here, so it's Kayshon Boutte, Kendrick Bourne. They did give him a nice contract this offseason. Demario Douglas, Tyquan Thornton, a second-round pick in 2022. Jalen Polk, a second-round pick this year. Javon Baker, a fourth-round pick this year. And then KJ Osborne. So, again, those are like 7 decent receivers, right? 7 solid receivers. But they don't have like that clear-cut number 1. It's not like KJ Osborne's at number 1. So if you're out there and you're a Bills fan and you're thinking, is there a wide receiver that the Bills could still get who presents some speed and some yards after the catch, some separation abilities, and you can get on that cheap 1-year deal, you don't have to pay him a lot, that might be KJ Osborne. I talked about him in the offseason because I thought he could be a free agent target for the Bills, especially considering the fact that he went to UB. I was like, hey, let's just bring KJ Osborne home. You know, really, they could do that. Now, as John says here, just use Samuel instead of going after Osborne. I agree. Like, they could just use Curtis Samuel more. But if you're one of those people who thinks that Mac Hollins doesn't really deserve a roster spot, then maybe you get KJ Osborne. But I will say the Bills love Mac Hollins for what he does in the blocking game and for special teams, as you saw last week in Seattle. So that's why I don't think that Mac Hollins is going anywhere. Really, I think this is a perfect role for Mac Hollins. He is wide receiver 5 right now, and that's exactly what you want going into the season, right? So I'm just throwing this name out there because I know there are people who are thinking that the Bills could get another wide receiver. I don't think that they're going to go after, you know, I know the Ravens just got Deontay Johnson, but I don't think they're going to make that kind of a move, right? Like, they already did that move with Amari Cooper. I think everything is set right now, but if they do want to go get one more, there is that option. So whether you want to put Andre Cisco in there as that 5th player or KJ Osborne, or just put one of them as an honorable mention, but there you go. There are 6 players, we'll say 6 players that the Bills could target here over the weekend and into that trade deadline on Tuesday afternoon. So let's see. I'm going to go through any more comments here. It is past the 8:30 part of the hour, so I'm going to take off in a few minutes. But if you have any other questions, if you want to talk about the trade deadline, if you want to talk about fantasy, I do want to talk about fantasy if you guys have any questions. So I'll stay on for probably, 5-10 more minutes and let me know what you have here. Okay. Oh, thank you, John. I heard Calais Campbell as depth, even though he's... Yes. Okay. Speaking of honorable mentions, I think I did write him down because I was like, you could really get him, right? Because I talked about Linval Joseph as McDermott and Bean always seem to go after those veterans, right? Like, just guys who you can plug in and just say, hey, you don't have to learn that much of the playbook. Just, we want to be able to plug you in. And we want you to be a serviceable backup, right? Like, just be part of that rotation. If they could get Calais Campbell, I think like I would be all for that, right? Because there have been rumors, maybe for the last 2 or 3 years. I feel like every offseason, it's like, oh, maybe Calais Campbell, maybe he wants to finish his career with a contender. So sure, yeah, maybe the Bills could sign him. Ultimately, they haven't. But I was looking at that last night, and I was like, I wonder if Bean would try to strike on that and say, you played in Buffalo on Sunday. Why don't you just turn around and come right back? Because we could use that depth. And there's the thing right there. You can use him as defensive tackle or an edge rusher. I think the Dolphins have him listed as an edge rusher this year. So, yeah, thanks for bringing that up, John, because I did write him down as another honorable mention. Okay, let's see. Joey says, if you do fantasy football, definitely take Stephon Diggs off your roster. Yeah, definitely. That being said, I do feel bad for Diggs, even though he was a diva here in Buffalo, and it was just a crazy offseason. I'm glad that the Bills are at where they're at now, but I really wish that Stephon Diggs was still healthy and playing, because I wanted to see Houston at their full potential, right? Like, Nico Collins should be back, and I wanted to see what Houston could do. Now, I know that wishing for that could come back to bite us, but I had this weird suspicion that the Bills could see the Texans in the playoffs. And I'm like, man, what if Houston goes into Kansas City and beats them in the divisional round? And let's just say, I don't know how the seedings would work, but the Bills beat the Ravens in the divisional round. And then they come back home to face the Texans for the AFC Championship, right? And it's like, oh, man, can you imagine the juice in the stadium with a healthy Diggs on the field? So, like, that was my envision. Like, I kind of had that vision, but that's not going to happen anymore. I think the Bills could still meet the Texans in the playoffs, but either way, it just sucks for Diggs. I saw someone on Twitter said that we should donate $14 to his donation. That is a great idea. That is very touching. So, yeah, I don't wish an injury on anybody, but we technically missed a bullet there by trading him. Hope he has a fast and healthy recovery. Yeah, I mean, that's to my point earlier when I was saying the Bills essentially dodged a bullet with all these guys now. Trey White is a shell of himself. Jordan Poyer, I got to be careful with how loud I say this because I know he is the opponent this week, but he's a shell of himself. Micah Hyde, I know he hasn't officially announced his retirement, but he probably would be a shell of himself. I think he would still be good, but maybe not, prime Micah Hyde, probably not there. Mitch Morse, I haven't really seen the metrics on him. Gabe Davis has not been living up to that contract in Jacksonville. And now Diggs, no one knows that you're going to tear your ACL, but that is a very tough pill to swallow. So it seems like Bean played his cards right. And you look at how they constructed this roster, and now you have Amari Cooper in the fold, and Keon Coleman is playing very well. Ray Davis, James Cook, right? Like the whole 9 yards. And I'm really confident about what we can do this season for the Buffalo Bills. So I think that's where we'll leave it tonight. If you have any final questions, try to squeak them in real quick. I want to thank our sponsors once again. Want to thank you guys, the viewers, for tuning into this show. We'll be back next Wednesday, but if Kevin and I can find some time to try to record something or maybe go live on the trade deadline day, be on the lookout for that. Maybe, Monday night, Tuesday afternoon, somewhere there. It'll be hard with our work schedules, but if we can do it, then we're going to do it. Tuesday night, election night, probably all bets are off after 5 o'clock after the deadline. But if we can squeeze something in between Monday night and Tuesday afternoon, we will. So with that, thank you once again. And again, my prediction is that the Bills can beat the Dolphins 37-13, maybe 17. Maybe we'll give them a few more points based on that offense. But I think that we're looking at a big dub once again here. Appreciate this, Joey. 12th Man Mafia. Yep, check them out on Facebook. And yeah, thank you to everyone once again. And go Bills.